I'd like to welcome everybody to our afternoon webinar with Mosaic on Introduction to Pricing. I'm Bill Johnston. I'll be the moderator and going to field the questions for Ken Robert, Matt Wallace, and Chuck Danner, and I'll introduce them in just a minute. What we're going to talk to you about today is the introduction on using the pricing tab in Mosaic. First part of the webinar, we're going to talk about creating a material list. And we're going to demonstrate how to set up a quick and simple material list to get the acquired amounts of materials as well as hardware that you'll use in a job for ordering. The second part of the webinar, we're going to talk about entering material and hardware costs. In other words, using that list we created and making some modifications to it. Then we're going to build a pricing template so we can get some quotes together. After that, we are going to have a question and answer, and you do have a Q&A icon on the bottom of your Zoom app. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A. And then the last part, we're going to talk about creating a quote for your customer in order to send it and demonstrate Syncly Pay, where we'll have Chuck Danner join us with Syncly Pay and talk about the benefits of the use of the new Syncly Pay that has been added as an option in version 14. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Matt Wallace. Matt, how are you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. Sun's out, chatting with my pals about Mosaic. Pretty good way to have the day. How about yourself?
Oh, doing good. Yeah, this is our second one of the day. I think we're ready for it.
Yeah,
Ken,
I think so too.
I am doing fantastic, Bill. Thanks for having me today, and thanks for everybody for joining our webinar.
Well, good. Well, I'm going to just hand it over to you, Ken. I'm going to turn off my video because I do have a face for the radio, and let you take it, Ken.
All right. Thanks, Bill. So welcome, everybody, to our introduction to pricing in Mosaic. Now, I find a lot of people kind of stay away from the pricing tab. Now, you may be using a different method or a different software, or maybe just spreadsheets to price your job. So a lot of people don't even explore the pricing functionality in Mosaic. Even if we don't need to create quotations for our customers, we can still take advantage of some of the functions in there. So we have this job ready, and in this job, we have two rooms. We have a kitchen and a bath. Let's take a look at the elevations in this room. So in this kitchen, we can see we do have some drawers. So we're going to have some guides. So we're going to need to know how many guides do we need to order for this job. We have hinges on our doors. We also have shelf pins for adjustable shelves. We can also see we have some pull hardware. We have pulls and knobs. Let's go to the next elevation on the opposite wall. And in this elevation, we can see we have some glass doors. Let's change that to a perspective and take a look. So we're going to want to make sure we account for that glass as well. Also, you can see we're using adjustable legs. And on this far right cabinet, we do have an insert. Let's take a look at that insert. Go to my 3D view. We're going to jump to the layers, and I'll turn the doors and the hardware off so we can take a look. So we can see in this cabinet, we do have an insert that we have to order. So we want to make sure that this is accounted for. Let me turn those layers back on and we can back out of here. Now, before we jump into the pricing tab, let's go take a look at the settings tab. And we can see the material and hardware we have selected for this particular room. So we're bringing in 5-piece traditional doors and drawers. We can see our pull hardware, our hinges. We're using the Blum Undermount 563s. We have our material selections. And we also have our miscellaneous selections here. So let's jump in. Actually, before we jump in, let's take a look at our other room as well. So we have a main bath. Now, the main thing in this room is that we are using a different material we're going to account for here as well. So let's jump to our pricing tab. So we're going to come up to the top to pricing, and we'll click that tab. Now, when we enter the pricing tab, we're going to notice we have some drop-down boxes up top: templates, filters, and reports. Your template dropdown is where you can select the template you want to generate for this job. Now, we're going to create a template, so we'll come back to that. Next, we have our filter dropdown. This is a way that we can filter our templates that are generated based on the rooms. And then we have our report drop down. And this is where we can generate a report based on the data we're going to pull in through our template. So right now, we just want a simple list of materials and hardware we're going to have to order for this job. We're not worried about prices or costs yet. We just want the list and quantities. So we're going to come over to the template editor button found over here on the right. Let's click that. When we open the pricing template editor, we're going to notice we have some options here on the left. Pricing items, add-ons, and then we have some totals down here. If we take a look at our pricing items, we can see that it contains a list of the components and pricing strategies that we can use within our job. Now, the first thing we want to do when creating a material list is think about what do we need? What are we going to have in this job that we need to make sure is accounted for? Well, first, our materials. We want to make sure that we know what materials we have to order. So we're going to come over to our pricing items and we'll grab the materials and we're just going to drag that over and drop it into the price items list. Next, we want to account for our banding. We want to know how much edge banding we need for this job. We also want to know, do we have any inserts in this job that we're going to have to order? After that, we can start bringing in our hardware. Well, we're going to need hinges, so let's bring that in. We need our drawer guides. We are using pulls, so we're going to need those. Also our legs. We can also bring in our shelf pins, and because we're using Conformat screws on this job, we want to make sure we get a count for those so we can bring in our fasteners. So now you can see we have a list of items that we want Mosaic to populate in our pricing template. Now, before we save this and exit out, we want to take a look at the on-screen view options. Now, these options are a way to hide or display the columns up top in your template. So we can see the taxable column. That is a column where we can tell Mosaic whether these items are taxed or not. Let's say we had an installation fee on here, and where we live, we don't tax that. So we would uncheck that so it's not calculated in our tax. Next, we have the item column. This is going to bring in the name of your items and materials. So you're going to want to keep that checked. The description column is going to add a column where you can add manual descriptions or comments. And then the quantity column is going to tell us how many sheets or board feet or how many items we have to order. And then the units tells us what units is that quantity in. Is it square foot, board foot, per sheet? And then we have the amount. That's going to be the cost of that particular item. The markup is going to be your profit margin. And then the total is going to bring the total price of those items. So we're going to turn off the total and the amount since we just want to see our counts. Now you're also going to see the show my cost button down here. Now this is if you want to output pricing for yourself. If you're ordering material, you're going to want to enable that. But if this was a quotation for a customer, we don't want to show them our costs. So we would uncheck that. Now that we're done with this template, let's come over and hit save. And then we can hit OK. When we hit OK, the pricing template editor is going to close. Now we can go up to our template drop box and we can select template. Now we get this dialog box where we can select which pricing template we want to run. Well, we want to run, let me make sure I hit save there. Let's jump back to that template editor. And I am going to have to create that again. So let me just add a new one. So I'll hit that. Let's call this material list. So we'll go through this one more time so you can see. So we have our material list. We'll make sure that template is enabled at the top. Again, we go to our pricing items and we're going to drag those items in. So our materials, banding, our inserts, and then we came down to our hardware. So we brought in our hinges, guides, pulls, shelf pins, legs, and our fasteners. Let's save that. Make sure we turn off our on-screen views that we set before. Save, OK. And now we can come back and select that template. We have our material list there. Now, the other options on this template run is we could give this run a unique name. We can also filter this run by room or cabinet number. Since we want to know how much material and hardware we want to order for this entire job, we're going to leave these filters alone. So we can hit OK. Mosaic is going to calculate the materials we need for this job, and we can see we have our list here. First, we'll start with our materials. We're going to need 2 sheets of 1/4-inch MDF. We're going to need 14.83 square feet of 8-inch glass, and that's for those glass doors we were looking at. We're going to need 4 sheets of MDF, 3/4 poplar board. We're going to need to buy 35.28 board feet. And then we have some pre-finished plywood and rift white oak. We're also getting the square footage for our countertop material. Below that, we have our banding. And in this job, we have 3 different types of edge banding, and you can see they're divided up there. So we know exactly how many linear feet we're going to need for this job, and this will help us check stock. Maybe we can check the stock and make sure we have enough of that. Next, we have our insert. So we need to order this trash pull-out toucan. We have our hinges. We're going to need 34 of those. Our guides, we have the different lengths listed here with the product number, so we know exactly what we have to order. Our knobs and pull counts, our shelf pins, the adjustable legs, and then we also know that we need 292 conformat screws to build this job. So we may want to go check our stock and make sure that we have an appropriate quantity in stock. And that gives us a material list so we know what to order.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. So now that we have this material list sorted, it'd be nice to maybe put some pricing to this. To get started, I'm going to pop back up to the template editor. I'm going to grab the material list. We're actually going to make a copy of this. So I'm just going to grab the material list. We're going to copy this, and we're going to call this job cost. So this is going to be my cost to actually produce this job in raw, just for the raw materials. I'm going to add my amount and my total, and I'm going to keep the show my cost enabled. We're going to save this and hit OK. I'm going to select a new template. We're going to grab the job cost, and we'll keep the same room filtered for all. Hit OK. And we can see now we have our job cost. Now, I forgot to add my totals. So let's go back into the template editor. I'm going to go back into job cost, and I'm going to come in here and grab a subtotal, tax, and total. Now, tax, this is going to vary, in your area, state, province, wherever you're coming from. I'm going to add 5%. That's what we're going to keep for today. Hit OK, and I'm just going to refresh this template. So I have a lot of zeros. This is a good starting point now, though. I know now where I need to start looking through Mosaic and adding my pricing. Okay. So starting with materials, I'm going to go up to libraries, go into materials. And starting with panel stock, we can see we have a few selections here, panel stock. Here's where we can add the cost. We can also add a markup percentage. So if we wanted to say, add 20% to all of our materials and hardware, I can add that percentage here. So starting with my 3/4 pre-finished plywood, we're going to add a price here. And I'm going to add my markup while I'm in here. My 5/8 plywood. 3/4 MDF. So we have some 3/4 MDF in this job, so we'll make sure to add a price for that as well. 1/4-inch MDF. We have some 1/4-inch MDF for our center panels on our paint grade doors. So those are going to be 38. Now, I have some melamine here. There's no melamine in this job, but we're going to go through maybe some options if your customer maybe wanted to change their mind on materials. So we'll add a cost in here for some melamine. Rift white oak. We have some rift white oak in for the solid fronts for the bathrooms. We're going to add a cost in there for that. Add our markup. Plastic, aluminum, plywood. We don't really have anything in there. I'm going to keep those out, but we do have some 1/8-inch glass. Now, 1/8-inch glass, you'll notice everything else here is set up by sheet. The glass has been priced by area. Okay, so I can add a cost here and my markup for those. Board stock. We do have some board stock here, the poplar board. So we're going to look for that guy, which is right here. With solid wood, you have an option to price by board foot or by area. I'm going to stick with board foot, and we'll add a price in here for that with a markup. Edge banding. Now, edge banding, we have 3 types of edge banding here, but with 14, we added the ability to do dynamic textures. For our banding, we just actually have one material. It's this 1/2 mil edge banding. You can see we have 1/2 millimeter and then in brackets the texture. So we're looking at the actual texture. That's how these colors are coming up. So I only have to add it to this one color. So we're going to add a price here. We'll say this is going to be by lineal foot. We have price by lineal foot right now. And markup on this is going to be 20%. Okay. If I click on refresh, you'll see that it's going to update. It's going to update all of the pricing here for that material. So now we can move on to hardware. Our inserts, it's telling us right now where that insert's coming from. So if we go to libraries, inserts, we're looking for cabinet accessories. And it's the trash toucan. So we're going to drop down this menu, and it's this one right here. So I can add my cost here for this if this is something I'm purchasing, and add my markup. Next, we'll move on to hinges and guides and pulls. So libraries, hardware. Starting with guides. So guides are going to be priced per pair per length. These each have their own cost. Now, when you're pricing out your guides, you want to consider everything that goes into that to mounting that guide. So if you have Euro screws or you have wood screws, you're going to have 2 clips, to add to those. So you'd want to make sure to think about that when you're adding this to your cost, and just include that in the price. I'm just going to put some round numbers in here, and then markup of 20%. Our hinges. So we're using advanced hinges for this this project. Now, this is a overlay or a frameless job. So the only hinge I can see right now that we're using is the 110 full overlay. So here's the hinge here. Again, just like your guides, you do have other components that could go with the hinge. You have your plate, you may have screws, you may have Euro screws, or if you're using Insertas, maybe you don't have those items, but you just would want to make sure to add that stuff together. So we're going to add that there and our markup. Pulls. So we're using 2 pulls. We got knob 6 and pull 1. So knob 6, give it a price of $250 and 20%. And pull 1, we have $450 and 20%. It's already in there. Perfect. Shelf pins. Actually, you know what? Before we get to the shelf pins, we have locks as well. Now, we don't have any locks on this project, but if you did have any locks in your project, here's your cost, here's your markup. Fasteners. So we are using those Conformat screws. We're going to find that fastener in joint templates. You're going to look for the fastener, which is right here, Conformat. And here we can add a cost to those with a markup. Closet rods. So again, we don't have any closet rods for this project, but you can add a cost in here. You can price it per unit or per lineal foot, up to you. Shelf pins, we're using the flat metal pin 5 mil right here. I'm going to give that a 0.3 and we will say 20% markup. Drawer front fasteners we're not using. Again, you have cost and markup here. Legs, we are using legs. So we'll add a cost for those. The markup. And then lighting, you do have options in here to add pricing for lighting, whether it be a spotlight or a strip light. All right, now it's done. We're going to refresh this. And I can see now that this project is going to cost my shop, around $3,400.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. So now we have our material list and we also know our cost on that material list. So we know exactly how much this job is going to cost us to make in materials and hardware. Now, before we move on, Bill, do we have any questions?
Yeah, one question is Drew asked if, he was a little late to the presentation here. Is it going to be recorded and will they be able to watch it later?
Yeah, so the webinar is recorded and we will be posting the recorded so you can, watch it when it's convenient for you.
Okay, and then Johnny posted one. Does that include the markup?
Yeah, this price that we have right now is showing our cost. This is not going to show markup quite yet.
Yeah, that'll do it right now, Mr. Ken.
Okay, so now that we have our material list with our cost, we could technically take this and with a few minor tweaks, we could convert this into a quotation for our customer. So let's do that. Let's jump back into our template editor up here at the top right. And we're going to come in and we're going to create a copy of that job cost that Matt just did. So we'll grab that job cost. We're going to hit the copy and paste button and we'll give this a name. Let's call this job quotation. We'll say okay, and we can close that window down. Now we're going to make sure we switch to our new job quotation. Now, when we're building a job quotation, we're going to want to think of how are we going to price our cabinets. Now, remember, we're already, charging for our materials. So the materials we're building this out of are already being taken into consideration, and they also have a markup on there. So the simplest way to price your jobs, and this is what we'll do in this demonstration today, is just linear foot pricing. And you can see down here we have those options for that. So let's bring our base cabinet per foot and we'll drop that at the top. Next, we'll do our wall cabinets. And then we'll bring in our tall cabinets. Now, because I'm going to charge the same amount per linear foot on all jobs, I'm just going to input my price right into the template. And that way, whenever I generate this template, those prices are going to come in automatically. So let's put some prices in. For my base cabinets, I'm going to charge $250. For my wall cabinets, I'm going to charge $150. And for my tall cabinets, I'm going to charge $500. So now we're taking into consideration the linear pricing of our cabinets, and we're also charging for the material and all the hardware we're going to be using. Now, we may want to charge separately for our doors. And if we come over, we do have a few door options. So we could divide doors into buyout doors and manufacturer doors. So we could have two separate headers depending on what doors we have in this job. Or we could just use the general doors pricing item, and that's just going to price all of the doors in the job. So let's bring that in. We'll drop that above inserts. Now also with my drawer boxes. So although I'm charging for that material I'm going to build those drawer boxes out of, I do charge an extra $25 per drawer box. So I'm going to want to bring my drawer boxes in and we'll set that there. Now, before we move on, let's go take a look at our doors and drawers library. So we'll save this and we'll come back. So if we head to the settings tab of this job and we take a look at our doors, let's switch to the kitchen. So in the main bath, we're using the slab door V. And in the main kitchen, we are using a 5-piece flat panel door. So let's go take a look at that. We're going to go to libraries, doors. That's going to open our door library. Because we are using a traditional 5-piece door, we're going to head to the traditional tab. And that's our door right there, that flat panel square. Now we have the pricing options down here. And you can see we can price this door. So we could put a cost per door, or we could charge per square foot on this door. We also have the minimum square footage. So you might want to say, regardless of how big this door is, I'm going to charge minimum 2 square feet. So you could put the number 2 in there, and then you have your markup percentage. You can also add the material cost to the door. Since we're already accounting for a door material, we're not going to add that to our door. And we'll just check our other doors in here. So we have our flat panel drawer we're using, as well as our reduced rail. And we also have our glass 4 light. Those are those glass doors in our job. And we can see we're charging a little bit more for these. So we're charging $35 per square foot. Also, with our main bath, we have the slab door V and slab drawer V, and we're charging a little less for those. Let's remove that minimum out of there, and we'll take a look at the slab drawer V and make sure we have our price in there. So this is how you would price your doors and drawer fronts. Let's say okay. Next, we're going to take a look at our drawer boxes. We are using the drawer undermount. So let's go take a look at those. We'll go to libraries, drawer boxes, and we have our drawer undermount here. Now you can see this is where I enter the cost per drawer in here. So this is just going to be a per drawer cost. It's not going to take in the volume of your drawers into consideration. And we're doing it this way because we're already charging for that material. So let's say okay, and we'll jump back to our pricing tab. We're going to head back to that template editor and let's open up our job quotation we were working on. So now that's our doors and drawers settled. But down here we have our totals. So our subtotal, tax, and total. That will give us the total price we're going to charge this customer for this job, but we might want to specify the deposit we expect and then the balance due after that deposit. So for that, we can come to our totals and we can grab deposit. We'll drag that in and our balance due. Now in the description column here, I'm just going to type deposit and balance due. Now it's handy to type in these descriptions because if we generate a payment with this, it'll specify what type of payment this is. So now that we have that, we want to think about, are there any other things we're going to have to charge our customers for? Well, we're going to have to charge our customers for the installation fees and maybe delivery as well. For that, we can head to the add-on section. Now, the available add-ons that we can use is an add-on price. This would just be, a cost that we're going to put into every job. We could put an add-on based to the square footage in this job per number of cabinets, or we can base it on the percent of subtotal or total. So first, I will do the installation. Well, let's say we charge per square foot for our installation. We'll drop that add-on there, and then in the description, I will type installation. Now we can see our cost per square foot over on this side in our amount column. I'm going to put $35. I'm always going to charge that amount, so I just want that to stick in my template. Now we can bring the delivery fee in. For the delivery fee, I charge $500 to anyone within my market range. So I'm going to drag in that add-on, drop it above our subtotal, and we'll put our delivery fee. Now I'm going to make sure I come over and input that price. So I charge $500. I'm going to input that $500. So now that we have those variables added, we have a robust pricing template that we can use as a quotation. But one thing we want to keep in mind is our on-screen view options. I do not want to show my customers my cost. This pricing template is going to be going to my customers. So I want to make sure that they're going to see the markups and that final price that I'm going to charge them. So now that I have that done, I can come over to my Save button, click OK, and now we can run a new template. Again, we're going to do that by coming up to our template dropdown. We're going to select a new template, and we're going to select our job quotation. Let's say OK. Mosaic is calculating the materials we're going to need, and we can see we now have linear pricing per cabinet type up at the top. We still are bringing in our materials, so we'll make sure we have all our costs covered. And if we head down near the bottom, we can see there's our add-ons, our installation fee, and our delivery fee. Now, let's say this customer was out of market and we need to charge a little bit more for that delivery fee. Well, we can still make adjustments on a generated template. So I'm going to say this delivery, it's quite far. We're going to charge $750 for that. And at the bottom, we have our deposit. So we can choose what deposit do we want from this customer. Well, from this particular customer, we want to do 50%, and then we can see our deposit due and balance due.
Now, I wanted to go over a few of the settings in the template here. If we click on settings, you can see you have options here to change the currency symbol. You can show what includes in the finished area. The material estimate. So right now we're using the optimizer in the background. It's running the optimizer to sort those materials, but you do have the option to do amount and waste. The waste percentage is added in the library's material. There's an area in there to add your material waste. Machining costs, if you're not using the lineal footage pricing and you wanted to get a bit more involved with machining costs and shop labors, you do have those options here. And then we do have options here to hide zero lines. So zero price, zero lines, empty headers. A great example of this, you'll notice the quartz. We have quartz in our pricing, but there's no value in here because we're maybe not supplying the quartz, but because we've drawn it in Mosaic, it's going to show up in our material list here. So if I was to select hide all zero lines and hit OK and just refresh this template, you'll see it'll drop that, that quartz off of the materials right there. Bill, was there any questions? Are we good to carry on?
Yeah, we're kind of going to parlay a few of these together.
Sure.
Jake asked about the edge banding. What if different texture costs, reflect different pricing amounts?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And
Yes. Yeah.
that kind of goes along with what Alina and Robert are saying also about how much paint, or can you add the paint? Could you price, like the finish work along with it?
Yeah, for sure. So with banding, we used a dynamic banding in this, but that may not be the case because pre-finished birch and rift oak might be totally different pricing. So if that was the case, then you would just not use a dynamic banding. You would want to set up different bandings in here and actually call them by that name, and then make sure that they have their own unique pricing. Adding finishing, so there's a few steps to this. You would have to first add the line. So there is a finished area line here. And I would actually say, if you guys got some time, click on this little blue question mark up here at the top right. It's going to go through a lot of these items in here and kind of explain where they're pulling from. But finished area is going to calculate your finished area based off of the settings that you have here in the pricing settings. So you can see where we're calling from. Now, if you're charging, like my shop, we used to charge, a couple extra bucks per square foot for darker colors versus light colors because we would tint our primer. So if you go to libraries, materials, go into your texture groups, you can actually add a cost addition to each color. So if you wanted to change, if you wanted to add on to your base price, you have the ability to do that in here. Okay. So I'm going to carry on. We've now created a pricing sheet. We want to now maybe create a report for our customer. Once you don't have access to the report until you've generated a template here. So with the report, if you were to drop down this menu, select report, we have some preset reports already done. This contract's a pretty neat one to use. You can modify these. I'll just show you what it looks like though. So you can see what you can print off or send as a PDF to your customer. So here's our report. Some of this information is being auto-filled from that first page in Mosaic. And then we have some sign-offs here. It's showing all of our subtotals, our totals, and our deposits. These templates can be modified. If you go into Report Editor, click on Open, you can select one of those contracts. And now you can see here, I can select like the Mosaic logo. I could delete this. And with the insert, I could bring in my own logo. You can change the shop information here. These variables, again, are just all brought in from that first page, but where you would bring them in for this actual document is going to be under the pricing data. We have options in here for like default variables, job tab variables, about variables, settings, totals. The totals are only going to populate totals that you have in your pricing template that's currently open, okay? Now, version 14, we did introduce Syncly Pay. I've created a other document here that's a little bit shortened invoice. This one here, I just cut out a little bit of the lower section so I had some more space. We can bring in Syncly Pay. So Syncly Pay, we could bring in a banner that's going to give us a QR code and a link. This will give you an ability to send this to your customer. They can click on that link and they can send payment, right away. So I'm going to add this banner into the wrong spot. Let me just fix that. Go back, undo. So we're going to click down here and we're going to say Syncly Pay banner. And let's just give that a little space. We're going to save this and close out the editor. Now, you'll have to sign in to your Syncly Pay. If you haven't set it up yet, we do have, your screen will probably look like this. So you're going to click on the Learn More, and then you can sign up in here. We got Chuck on the call today, so I know he's here to answer some questions if you guys have any questions. But you're able to sign up with that, and once you've done that, you can generate a report that will spit out something like this. So it's going to give you your contract. Here's your QR code, or again, they could just click on the, click here, and it's going to send them right to payment options for that project. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, Chuck, we've got questions about the Syncly Pay. If you could join us from a mall, Syncly Pay, does it work in Canada?
Yep, let me get unmuted. So today we're processing in just the US, but we just got through the registration process with the Bank of Canada, which is a requirement to process theirs, and we've started development work. So by the end of this year, we will be in Canada with payment processing.
And then we have another one from Andy. Will you please review the costs associated with Syncly Pay and how it works in general? If you just give us an overview, Chuck, that'd
Sure.
be great on how this would work for our customer and benefit them.
Sure. Let me start off with saying there are no separate fees. So Mosaic isn't charging you anything separate to be able to have payment integrated. Syncly's not charging you anything separate, like a monthly fee or anything like that. The fees that you pay are what actually come from the card brands. So from MasterCard, Amex, Discover, Visa, right? Those are the fees that you pay. So it's a per transaction. Every transaction, depending on how that transaction, they call it qualifies, is, we have a set rate for what that transaction is, and that's what you pay. So it's a pay as you go, right? There's not a requirement, a minimum amount per month or anything like that. Also, how it works is really, the reason that we joined forces with Mosaic from Syncly, just so you're aware, we already do payment processing for multiple other Syncly companies that are out there today. We connected with Mosaic just as a value to our customers, to Mosaic customers. So it really is aligned with that quote that you send out as part of this pricing piece. So your customer can go ahead and pay at the time they receive the quote. Bluntly, you're not trying to chase them down for a check or for a credit card payment, whatever it may be, to be able to get a deposit to kick off the project. Same way when you're finished, right? They can pay right through the link. It just makes it so much easier. Credit card is definitely opens an option, but we also allow for ACH, so checks to be done through this process as well, which is I think it costs 0.5% to be able to run the checks through the system and be able to be deposited right in your bank account.
Yep.
We are not integrated into QuickBooks. We are working with Mosaic to get that in the works. Today, it would be a manual entry into QuickBooks. However, everything in front of that is automated for you.
Armin's asking about generating. Unfortunately, with I guess the security behind the Syncly Pay, we learned this today. When I'm broadcasting this, I actually can't produce that link right now. It's blocking me out from signing in to Syncly Payments, but this does function. It basically, you click sign in and you generate a link. It's going to automatically pop, it give you an option to open it up as a PDF or open it up into your reports, and it's going to spit out that document for you.
Well, we've got a few other questions here. We've got one from Sean. Do you create a new template for each construction method that you have put together? Matt, some people have a frameless, a Gola library, a face frame library, a standard overlay. How would you handle that situation in your pricing tab?
You could do that, but this is also where you could take advantage of the settings here for hiding, zero lines and hiding empty headers. So, if you have a job where you have a lot of solid wood or whatever, there's items that you may not like. You're doing a job that has legs, and you maybe are now doing a job that has ends going to the floor. You can have it set so that if the template's seeing that there's no legs hardware in the template or in that job, it's going to remove that line completely. So really, it's up to you. I mean, you can have as many templates as you like, but if you want to just run one, you can set those lines to zero, so to zero out when they there's nothing in them.
Perfect. Roger has one, and I'm going to go ahead and answer this one if I can. It says, will you be having more webinars in the future? This is awesome, guys. I knew you could price, but this is great. Roger, we are. In fact, we're planning a whole series of webinars that Ken and Matt are going to be hosting, and we will announce those in the near future coming up. So please pay attention to the Mosaic Forum and the Mosaic Software Users group there. Now, I've got another question. Is there a way to differentiate between, let's say, a paint grade cabinet on the pricing and a stain grade cabinet? I believe James is asking, customer wants a stain grade cabinet, and then they realize after they get that initial price that they can't afford the additional cost for the finish work, and they decide to go with the paint grade cabinet. Is there a way to change that easily without having to redraw and regenerate the whole pricing report and plan?
So there is the what if functionality. And if we click on the what if functionality, essentially Mosaic is going to give us options to change our materials or hardware per room. So if we just wanted to do an island, that island would have to be its own separate room, and then you could filter those there. So if you just wanted to do a few cabinets in your job, you would probably go back to your job, select that section of cabinets you want to change, and then we would right click, override those material templates to make those changes, and then you would be able to run a new template based on those material changes. But if you had a room set up and you said, well, I'd like to, what would this cost if I change the material for the entire room? So that's where we can use that what if function. So in the what if function, we can see this column here is our current settings. And then over here are our second options. So we can make some changes in here. So let's say our customer wanted to know, what if we went from the pre-finished plywood to a melamine? How much less would that cost me? So we could come in and we could grab that drawer template and switch it to our 5/8 melamine. And we could do the same with our cabinet material. We'll switch that to 3/4 melamine. Now let's head down to our main bath, and we'll also make that change here as well. We'll select that 5/8 melamine and that 3/4 pre-finished. And we'll let Mosaic calculate those costs so we can see. Now we can let our customer know if we change this. Oh, let me change that cabinetry template to white melamine. So after Mosaic calculates this, it's going to show us the difference between pricing on these two setups. So maybe our customer goes ahead and says, you know what, I'm going to go with the option 2. Now we don't have to go back to our settings and make all those changes. We could simply hit accept, and Mosaic is going to reset the settings tab and pricing template to match those selections. Let's say, okay, Mosaic is recalculating. And now our price has been updated to the melamine. If we head back to our room settings, materials, we can see that Mosaic has automatically changed our material templates for us. So that's where that functionality can come into play. So what if is a good feature that's definitely worth exploring. But if you just wanted to change a cabinet or two, you would override those materials in your job.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I've used the what if a few times in the past myself. And it really is handy once you learn how to use it. We have another question from Samarjeet here. How do you remove items from your pricing template?
So in our pricing template, we can just select a row. If we didn't want to show that row, we can right click on that row and delete it. That's just going to completely delete that row from this pricing run, and that row will no longer be taken into consideration.
Okay, so if you open up the template editor, could you show us how to move rows up and down in there, Ken?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's head back to our template editor and let's take a look at our job quotation, for instance. So we have all of our selections here. Let's say I wanted my inserts to be above my door. I can grab that inserts row and I'm just going to drag it above and place that where I want. If I wanted to move those legs up, I can simply drop them to where I want them to sit. And that's going to update that template for me. So you can lay those out in the order that you prefer. And then when we refresh this template, we'll see those changes take effect. those rows are going to shift to their new positions.
Matt, we have one from Anthony. Doesn't linear foot pricing include all base and wall cabinets, or do I need to charge separately? Also, isn't doors included in the price?
Yeah, that's actually entirely up to you. In this example right now, we're charging for material. Our base price for our lineal footage on our cabinets, that's really going to be just labor, like the labor factor for putting a base cabinet together. Whether that cabinet's out of plywood or melamine or MDF, those are going to be the factors that are going to change in our materials. You know, you could, if you wanted to say you wanted just to be a lineal foot, you say, hey, I'm charging $550 a lineal foot for base cabinets. That includes my hardware, that includes, you know, up to 3 drawers and the doors. Then that's entirely up to how you want to price that.
We discussed that before we set up this webinar, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring it through with the foot price, with the base, wall, and talls separated, is once you add pricing to all of your products in your product library, if there's any change to that pricing, you are going to have to spend some time and update all those in that product library.
The question, number of guides and number of hinges. So
Yep.
we've added options in the template editor. And again, you know, you don't have to use everything that's in here. You can get a base price, make it fairly simple for yourself, or you can get really into the weeds on how you want to do it. How we added the hardware were our guides and our hinges. We included the plates and the clips and the screws all in that hardware price. If you wanted to, you know, really kind of dial it down, you could add like number of hinges, number of guides. This is something that we may kind of look into on another webinar. This one's going to be just like the basic pricing. If we were to do maybe more of an advanced pricing, I think we're going to talk more about those items.
Perfect. And Lloyd has a couple questions here. For most of my jobs, I come up with a price before I draw anything. Is there a way to manually input these quantities? And the second part of that, what about installation pricing?
Okay, so to answer that first question, we have to generate a template to get the template. So if you don't have anything in your job, you generate this template, you're going to have empty headers. So you would have to, you know, place some items in your job and generate this pricing run. But once you do that, you are able to override the quantities in here. So if you wanted to change some things, and anytime you override something in here, it's going to turn blue to show you that that was manually edited. So you can edit it after the pricing template is generated, but you are going to have to, you know, at least start drawing your job to bring in your materials and hardware that's going to be used. Now, the second part of the question, the installation costs. So we did add the installation cost to our template here, and you can see we are pricing this per square foot. So it's 56.66 square feet, 35 per square foot, just shy of $2,000. And if you didn't see how we added that, so in the job quotation, we put an add-on. So the installation, and you can see the add-on we used is the square foot add-on. We can find that on the right in the add-on section. So we brought in the add-on per square foot. If you just have a base price for your installation, you may just want to bring in a general add-on, or maybe you're charging installation per the number of cabinets. So count the number of cabinets, and then we're going to put a fee on each cabinet. Or maybe we want to do the percentage of subtotal or total. So you'd have to put some thought into that, how you price that. And then you can just bring those add-ons, write your description so you know what those are, save your template, and then that will bring in that pricing for you.
Matt, I got one for you from Alina. How is a 5-piece door accounted for? Is this supposed to be treated like a buyout door, or is a material accounted somewhere? Can you explain, Matt, the differences between the door buyout in the pricing template form?
So the template we have in 14, we added, so we have doors were always in there, and that would be any door that you have in your job. You now have the buyout door option and manufactured door option. So manufactured door option, you know, it's going to, you could have separate pricing for either the buyout versus manufactured. The manufactured doors, they're going to be including the material in the materials here. So this square footage that we've added here is just the square footage of the door. This is not calculating any material. This again would be maybe something that you are charging out to as a labor factor for building that door. Whether that door is poplar, you know, oak, alder, maple, it doesn't matter. The same, you know, the price probably is going to be, it's going to take you the same amount of time to make the door. the value of that door is going to go up whether or not you have poplar board here or rift oak board here, and so on. If you've set it as a buyout door, it's going to remove that material out of the materials altogether, but you could still have a square footage for the door. If you have a supplier that's supplying you, usually they have a square footage price that they charge, then you could just add that there with a markup, and then you're good to go.
Ken, I've got one for you, please. Hollis is asking if using the ordering, does this account for waste, or do we need to calculate that independently? So in other words, if you're using the pricing template for your material ordering, does that account for your waste of your material?
With the settings we have right now, it's not. It's doing a genuine optimizing. So it's sending this material to the optimizer in the background, calculating how many sheets it needs and sending us back. Now, if we did want to work in waste to that, like a waste percentage, we could head over to our settings button in our pricing. In our material estimate setting, we have some options: amount and waste, optimizer, and then whole sheet count. So right now we have it on optimizer, which essentially means we're sending it to the CNC in the background, nesting it, and then bringing that number back as a whole sheet count. If we turn this off, we would get sheet counts like 4.2 sheets. Since we have it on whole, we're getting counts as whole numbers, so 5. Now, if you did switch this to amount and waste, this will calculate the square footage of this part, and it's going to bring in the waste factor for that material. Now, where that waste factor is entered is if we go to libraries, materials, and let's select one of these materials. Let's grab our 3/4 pre-finished UV. So let's say we wanted to add 20% on that. We can add that 20% there. So what Mosaic will do, it's going to calculate that square footage of material used, and it's going to add an extra 20% on there to account for our waste. So if you wanted a smaller waste percentage, you could drop that number, or if you wanted to increase it, you can increase it so it works for you.
And another thing that I wanted to point out, when Mosaic is figuring the materials, it is based off the estimate fast in the optimizer. You do have the optimizer on your version. Please optimize the job and get your quantities that way. But this is definitely going to, get you almost there with 100% of everything you're doing. Matt, I got a question from Jared. Is there a way to price uppers according to their height? I have a 48-inch upper cost more than a 38-inch upper to build, or is that calculated in my material template?
Probably would want to look at square footage pricing instead of lineal footage, which is an option. You have that in here. You're going to look under pricing items. So we have the lineal footage, and then here's the square footage pricing. So that would follow then the heights.
Heights of your cabinets based on the square footage of the frontage, right?
Correct, yeah.
For installation price, is there a way to calculate it per linear foot?
So with the add-ons, there's a square foot add-on, which is going to bring in the square footage of the footprint of the cabinet. Now, if you wanted to do an installation cost per linear foot, that's where you could bring these parameters back in, and you could just put a different cost. So if you wanted to charge, let's say $30-something per foot, you would add another version of these at the bottom. You can add your description to tell it this is the base cabinet install, wall cabinet install, tall cabinet install, and then you could put those appropriate amounts. So you would just reuse that. So in your template editor, you want to think of these pricing items as functions. It's essentially measuring something. So we're measuring the linear feet here if we wanted to measure by square foot. So if we go down to those add-ons and we take another look, the options are just a general add-on where we're going to put a dollar amount, by square foot, by the number of cabinets, or percentage of the subtotal or total. So to do what you would want to do, you're just going to add these cabinets again to your template. Yeah, let me just type these out. So base install, wall install, and then tall install. Then we would come over and give that a dollar value. So let's say we're saying, $50 per linear foot of cabinetry. Maybe for our wall cabinets, a little bit less. Maybe we're only charging $40 for wall cabinets. And then from there, we can save that, say OK. refresh our template. And then we can see we have those install amounts coming in on linear foot amounts.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining today for the first part of our fall webinar series, Introduction to Pricing. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Chuck, for everything you've contributed to this. And soon we will have some other information about future webinars that we will post on the Mosaic forum as well as the Facebook group.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining our forum, our webinar today. And, keep an eye out for future webinars. We're going to be doing some more. So we look forward to seeing you there.
Y'all have a good day. Thank you.